Alrighty, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are super excited to be talking about The Witch and the Vampire here, celebrating its release. We have two amazing authors with us tonight. We have the author of The Witch and the Vampire, Francesca Flores, and then joining us as the conversation partner, we also have Amparo Ortiz. Francesca Flores is a writer, traveler, and linguist. Raised in Pittsburgh, she read every fantasy book she could get her hands on and started writing her own stories at a young age. When she's not writing or reading, Francesca enjoys traveling, dancing ballet and jazz, practicing trapeze and contortion, and visiting parks and trails around San Francisco, where she currently resides. She is the author of Diamond City, Shadow City, and the upcoming The Witch and the Vampire, which we're celebrating tonight. Amparo is the author of BLAZEWRATH Games and Dragonblood Ring. She was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and currently lives on the island's northeastern coast. She's published short stories, comics in Marvel's Voices, COMUNIDADES. Did I say that right?
COMUNIDADES, yeah. Communities, I think it's also in English, yeah.
Oh, okay. And the Eisner-award winning Puerto Rico Strong. She's also co-editor of Our Shadows Have Claws, which we proudly sell at Mysterious Galaxy, which is a young adult horror anthology featuring myths and monsters from Latin America. So thank you both for being here. We appreciate you guys tuning in and taking the time to talk about this wonderful book. If anyone has any questions during the event, please direct them to the Ask a Question button, which is down at the bottom, as well as if you guys are so inclined or have not already gotten your copy, all of the books that are by these brilliant authors are available at the button at the bottom, which I will be adding since it's not showing up. But so I'm going to hand it off to these two lovely authors, and I will see you guys at the end.
Thank you.
Yay! Congratulations!
Thank you! Oh my gosh. It's finally here.
It's been, yes, I feel like I've heard about this book for ages, but that's like a great thing, obviously, because it made the hype even more intense for me, even though I've read it.
I mean, it's been in my life for 2 years now. That's when I started writing it, spring 2021.
That's actually a great segue, because my first question was exactly that. Like, can you talk about that initial inspiration? You said 2 years. What set it off 2 years ago?
So many things. So I knew I wanted my next book to be about two best friends, and I knew I wanted there to be a strong romance. I knew I wanted it to have like a friends to lovers element. I didn't really have anything else planned then, but I had a lot of stories that I'd written before that I'd written maybe 5 or 6 chapters before, or maybe got halfway through or something, or some of them I even finished, but I had to put aside because I knew they weren't like ready to be published, or I just didn't feel like pursuing them. But I knew I wanted this new book to have a lot of elements of things I really loved. And so I went back to those older projects and I took a lot of things from them. So a lot of them were vampire books. I've written many vampire stories in my time. And then so many. And then
you say that like it's a bad thing. It's not. It's a great thing.
It is. But this was also around the time where on Twitter there were a lot of authors and agents just talking about how we wanted vampire stories to come back. And I was like, I'm ready. I have so many waiting.
Yes, like,
I'm ready for this.
They're all tucked away until the right moment comes
Exactly.
along.
And so I took some of the elements from those stories and also from a story about witches that I'd written, and it was two best friends there also, and also a story with like a magical forest, and the villain in there is very similar to the one in The Witch and the Vampire. And so I wanted all these elements, not just because it was stories that I'd had to put away and couldn't really look at anymore, but also because all these stories had something that I really loved. And so I kind of took my favorite things from each and then just, I don't know, it just kind of worked out. And I think it helped make the book really unique. So yeah.
I agree. I mean, I think all of those inspirations or those sources of inspiration definitely led to what we see today. And speaking of sources, one of them is Rapunzel, because this book is a Rapunzel retelling, but it also includes, as you mentioned, vampires and witches. So can you talk about how you combine these very different things while also telling a romance story?
Yeah, so I think the fact that I had so many different points of inspiration that helped me come up with this kind of just helped me put those different aspects together more easily, because I knew I wanted the vampires there. I knew I wanted the witch. I didn't want it to be a vampire and human romance. That's just
right.
I don't know. I read a lot of those and watched those. Yeah. But I even when I was writing those vampire stories, like in high school and middle school, like I always preferred writing second world fantasies, so not in our world. So the love interest was always like some kind of magical person anyway. So that came into play here. Yeah.
You definitely have a brand then.
Yeah.
Those are hard to get rid of.
Yeah, I can't really write in our world. I've tried. It just doesn't really work out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so the vampire element and the witch element were there from the start. Also, the romance was something that I really wanted to be strong from when I first started writing the story. The Rapunzel aspect came in a little bit later. Actually, when I say later, I mean like 2 or 3 weeks later, after I started like outlining and brainstorming. But yeah, so there's a lot of nature elements in the book, a lot of like plants and trees and flowers and stuff, and nature is really important in a lot of Rapunzel stories. And my main character, Ava, she's a vampire, but she's also a root witch, which means she can control like plants and earth and rocks and everything like that. And so the fact that she's also kind of locked away in this tower by her mother also felt very Rapunzel. And so then I started to dive more into the actual fairy tale, and just the natural forest magic setting also seemed very fairy tale-esque to me. So then I really started to lean into the retelling aspect and sort of just craft it around that.
That's awesome. I feel like immediately you see that tie between Rapunzel and the specific story, but because of Awa specifically.
Yeah.
Specifically. So you mentioned that you have written so many vampire books. So have you always been a fan of specifically like vampires, or was it a gradual thing?
It was always vampires, and I don't even know why, because I was into vampire stories before I even read Twilight. Like, like in middle school, I was writing vampire stories. Like, yeah. And so I think that's also why I didn't immediately have, like, that's why my initial love of vampires was never centered around like high school romance with a human love interest. Not that there's anything bad with that, because that's what I read. Like, I loved Twilight, I loved Vampire Diaries and everything, but that wasn't what I wrote since I didn't start with that inspiration. But I genuinely don't know where it came from. I think I just thought vampires were cool. I don't know. I still think they're cool.
I feel like they're super cool. I would like to hang out with one, but at the same time I wouldn't. You know what I mean? It's like, no. It's great, but it's not great.
I mean, I'm like the weirdo who's like, yes, turn me into a vampire. Then I can actually get things done. Like, I'm such a Capricorn.
Yes, you're more competent, and you would feel like you're not going to injure yourself easily, which is my main concern at all times.
Would you describe yourself as clumsy?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel like I have been to physical therapy more than an athlete, like a professional athlete, and I don't play any sports. So imagine.
You should maybe also aspire to be a vampire.
Sure. Yeah, just because of that.
I recommend that for you. Yeah.
It's a good life choice, Amparo.
Yeah.
And I mean, speaking of vampires, a lot of them are inserted for some reason in romances. I mean, I say for some reason, but I can get why they would be.
Yeah. Very appealing.
For you specifically as an author, and for YA readers in general, like, what is the role that love stories play?
Yeah, so I usually don't write such romance-heavy stories, but whenever I do, it always ends up being sort of a friends to lovers thing. I think I just really love exploring like the strong connection between two characters. And although I'm a fantasy author, I really respect romance novels in how deeply they can dive into each character and really just write a whole like 300, 400 page book out of a connection between two characters. And I think that's just so impressive. And then I think romance and fantasy have a lot of things in common in, you know, not in the actual story, but that in that they're both critiqued as not really being serious literature.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So fantasy gets it because people are like, oh, that's magic, it's for kids. And then romance gets it because people think it's like, I don't know, silly or something. But
for women.
Yeah. I think those people need to get a hobby or go to therapy or something. But
both.
Maybe, yeah. But yeah, I think they're both really great fantasy because it really, like, it puts you in a completely different perspective by putting you in the eyes of a character who's literally in a different world or functioning with a whole different set of rules. And so that's really a great vehicle to, I don't know, convey a message through your story. And then romance, like I said, can really delve deep into the lives of these characters and just really expand on them. And yeah, I think it's amazing what romance authors do.
I honestly could never fully commit to a romance novel
entirely,
like just romance or mainly romance. So anyone who can write one that is believable and makes me fall in love as well, you're doing something great.
Yeah. Honestly, anyone that can write a book without magic, they impress me.
Oh my god, yeah, they truly are the real talent in our industry. I feel like, wow.
I feel like so many fantasy authors think that. We're always like, I don't know how you write a book without magic and explosions. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, it's like, well, how do you write tension and challenges? And speaking of the tension and in romance, because of course you do have a love story within your fantasy, and I was wondering like about Ava and Kay's tension. It to me, it's immaculate, and it's growing in a way that feels organic and earned, which I feel like are the two most important things in romance. What was the hardest part about building their romantic chemistry, and how did you, as you say, you loved friends to lovers, how did you take them from being best friends to enemies to lovers specifically?
Yeah. So I think every book I write ends up having a different process, and this one ended up being even more different. Sorry, my mic is being weird. But this one ended up being even more different than my others. And so with this one, I didn't start with the plot or the world, and that's usually what I start with. But I really wanted to challenge myself with this one to make it very character focused and get that more solid than anything else, because I knew that it was going to be a very romance heavy book. And so I started just by brainstorming random scenes with these two characters together, or thinking of each other, or talking about each other, because that's something that I love in a lot of books. Like, for example, Six of Crows. There's 6 points of view in that book, and
super ambitious.
Yeah. But what I really love is that you get to know the other character through, the other points of view. And so that's something that I kind of wanted to channel. And so I was writing about each character through the other character's point of view, and just kind of seeing what they love about each other. And then also getting into the angst, because once I figured out the plot and everything, then I started seeing the enemies element, best friends to enemies to lovers. And so then I think the fact that they had their strong friendship in the past really allowed for a lot of angst to come through with the enemy aspect. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, like losing a friendship and, either wanting it back or hashing it out and hating each other. Just so many different emotions can come up. And so I really wanted to delve into those kinds of things. But then these two characters had also had a crush on each other when they were younger. And so then the book starts when they're in like the enemy stage, and their memories and everything are from when they were best friends from a few years before the book starts. And then, so they start in the enemy stage, and I really just wanted to take my time building from that and showing how they can learn to trust and forgive each other to grow into the love stage. So that's how I did it.
Because I think that there's a lot of, for example, like the miscommunication trope or actual blatant betrayal. And I feel like all of it makes it that much richer. Like when you see, like, the payoff is more satisfying because you have built so much tension, and it works brilliantly.
Thank you. It was really fun to write. I was like, so much angst.
I could tell, because as a reader, specifically when you're on the author side, you can tell when an author is putting something into the scene or the chapter because their editor suggested it. You can kind of feel it. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
I know what
you
you mean.
kind of feel that there's like world building information or like characterization that doesn't quite feel that natural. Yeah. And then you feel like the author is having an absolute blast. And I feel like reading your book to front to back was a blast.
It was so fun to write, honestly. Like, I can't say that. I loved all my books I've written, but This one just
we love
kind
all
of
our children here.
flowed. Yeah. we don't have favorites.
No, we don't.
I do have a favorite.
We do. But we don't talk about it.
Just don't tell the other ones. They don't need to know.
Yes, we don't need to tell them.
Yeah.
And, as I mentioned, you did have a lot of fun writing this book, but was there a favorite part exactly, or a favorite scene, or something that you just could not wait to sit down and get onto the page?
Favorite scene, I think, oh my gosh, there's so many cute ones, but
yes.
I think it's chapter 28. I'm not going to look right now. But,
oh my god, like even the chapter itself, love it.
Chapter 28 or 29. I'm just going to say there's a lake and it's cute. That's all I'm going to say.
There's a lake and it's cute. We don't need to go deeper.
That was my favorite scene. But so I loved all the romance scenes. But apart from that, I just really loved being able to make my own kind of vampire, since I had consumed like so many different types of vampire media over the years. And I just think it's crazy that the first... So I had written a lot of like short stories when I was a kid. Not like short stories, but like... I don't know. I try to write something and it just fizzles out, whatever. Like when I was like a little kid. And then when I was 13, that's when I first tried to write a book. I didn't finish it, but it was a vampire book. And that was the first thing that I actually tried to write as a full novel. And so I think if you could tell like 13-year-old me, hey, you got a vampire book published, she'd be like,
oh my
God.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Like if we could actually speak to our teenage selves.
Right.
And like on the contrary, or on the other side of that question, what was the hardest part about writing this book? Like, would you say was the biggest challenge?
So this might seem like contradictory to what I said a few minutes ago.
The exact same thing.
About how the romance scenes and everything, and it just kind of flowed and it felt really easy to write. Like their chemistry was really easy to latch onto. But I think that's because I made myself focus on that from the beginning, because my default with books is usually to start with the world and the plot, and like I'll have an idea of the main character, but I usually don't flesh them out until like I have more an idea of what kind of environment they're growing up in, because I like seeing how the world shapes the character into who they are. But with this book, I really wanted to focus on the characters, so I started with that, but that meant that I had to sometimes stop myself from jumping into pages and pages and pages of world building, but also still making it feel like a fleshed out world, but having the focus be the characters. So that was hard for me.
I can totally relate to that. It's quite exciting. I mean, I brainstorm in my head mostly. I don't brainstorm like typing out things, but it's same, absolute same. So what is the main message that you would say you want readers to take away from The Witch and the Vampire? Why do I always want to say vampire first?
Because vampires are awesome.
I actually prefer witches, but anyway. Don't tell vampires.
Okay.
I don't want them.
Yeah, don't tell them. Well, something I talked about earlier was how I really liked writing friendship stories and kind of delving into, especially like friendship breakup stories and just like all of the kind of angst that can exist in a friendship, sometimes even more than in romantic relationships. So I think one message is to just really value, what is wrong with my, anyway, to really value... is to really value your friendships.
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, good. It's just me being weird. So to really value your friendships, but I also want for readers to have inspiration to stand up for themselves more, since Kay and Ava have to learn to do that in different ways while sort of also repairing their friendship and growing it into something new.
Yeah. I mean, why did I say I was like, mic drop. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I would say I took away from it. And I mean, I don't know a lot of readers currently seeking like such a specific type of book in terms of the plot itself, but definitely witches, vampires, sapphic romance, and fantasy, like the genre itself. It's like always in demand, So I feel like this is a book that will appeal to a vast majority of fantasy readers, and every single one of them is going to be like affected by it in a specific way.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice.
At least that's my humble opinion.
Thank you.
And I'm always right, so.
You are. It's the rule of the universe. You are right.
Yes. So I have a bit of a challenge for you right now, speaking of challenging parts. We're going to do rapid fire questions.
Okay.
So you can answer as quickly as you wish. And I'm going to start. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. So dream date idea for the main characters in your book.
Here's my book. So I think they would want to maybe get out of the forest since they're in the forest all the time.
Absolutely agree.
So maybe they're kind of sick of that, like closed spaces.
Traumatizing for them at this point.
It is, yeah. So maybe they want like a nice open space, maybe like a beach or something, or like a field. I don't know. Not camping. That's trees. A beach.
No camps.
No camping.
Yeah, no camping involved.
Yeah.
Love it. So if you could pick one fantastical aspect from your book's world building to actually exist in our world, which would it be and why?
Well, you might think I would say the vampires, but wow, I feel like I'm betraying myself right now. I'm actually going to say the witch powers just because there's like lots of different kinds of witch powers in my book, so I think it would be cool if everybody could kind of have their own cool little power, so that would be fun to see. Yeah.
I would definitely like that amount. I mean, I don't think vampires in our world would be nice.
We might not like it.
Admire it. I feel like some people out there are actually vampires, but you know, whatever. It's
cool from a distance, but
exactly.
Like a distance.
Imagine they can be treated like royalty, and who needs more of that?
Right. That would get so messy.
Okay, so Team Edward or Team Jacob?
So, if you asked high school me, I would have said I was obsessed with Jacob, extremely obsessed with Jacob.
Really?
But then as an adult, I don't know if this is just because I haven't reread the books as an adult, but I've rewatched the movies, and rewatching the movies as an adult, I've switched to Team Edward. Which high school me would be like, are you crazy?
I think I'm always going to be Team Bella. But if it's
Team Bella single?
Team Bella single, yeah.
Okay.
But I think that's because Team Edward, Edward himself is like fascinating to me as a goth. I'm like a spiritual goth, I call myself. And I feel like Edward is the ultimate goth to me in a lot of ways. And then Jacob feels very just Latino for some reason.
Oh, Taylor Lautner.
He just feels like a Latino boy to me, and it's way too familiar. I'm like, no, I don't think that's my type. I'm sorry.
See, for him, he felt like boy next door for me when I was like that age. So I was like,
exactly. I'm like, no. Next.
I also really like long hair. So when he had his long hair season,
oh, I see it.
Yeah, when he cut it, I was like,
you're like, why? It was working so well. All right, speaking of more vampires, Team Damon or Team Stefan?
Team Damon for a short time, Team Stefan for a long time.
That's a brilliantly worded answer. I think that when you read the books versus when you watch the show, I think I would prefer to be Team Stefan.
I haven't read the books.
Right. Yeah. It's okay if you don't read them.
It's okay. I can pass.
And Damon is just to me like someone I would never absolutely even like talk to. I would stare at him for obvious reasons, but yeah. So as you already know, you and I are huge astrology girlies. We've discussed this multiple times. Do you know Ava and Kay's zodiac signs? If not, can you give us an overview of which sun signs you think fit them best?
So I really have fun with astrology. I usually don't think of it for my characters for some reason. I guess I'm just so busy editing the books and I'm just like, but
right. And it's almost like super personal. So
yeah, but I have discussed these with some author friends, and I feel like Kay, she's a fire witch, so this might sound a little like obvious, but I feel like she's a fire sign. And I feel like she's probably an Aries. She's really like passionate and determined and confident, but she also has a temper, which is kind of like a bad stereotype of Aries. But I have Aries moon and my moon and rising are Aries, so it's fine. So I'm talking about myself here. Yeah. I have a lot of Capricorn and a lot of fire. So
interesting.
Yeah. So I think that would be Kay. And then Ava, like my first instinct with her was water sign because she's very emotional, she's very soft, but then I started like thinking about it a lot more, and I feel like that might be more her rising sign, how she appears to the world. So I think maybe she would have kind of a Scorpio rising where she has a lot of intense emotions. And then this is why I love you. And then so yeah, she's really intense emotionally, but that's kind of like her outward projection. And her inner self, I feel like, is probably more Sagittarius. I'm a Sag Venus. Okay. And so I think she loves adventure, but she also has a strong sense of justice, and she really sticks to like her morals, and she has like strong opinions. So yeah, so they're both fire signs.
Yeah, that's perfectly explained. I feel like I'm a Scorpio rising and a Scorpio Venus, but I'm a Capricorn, and it's a whole thing if you're not an astrology girly like ourselves.
I'm sorry to everyone in the chat.
Our apologies.
We're moving on.
Yes. If you could have witch powers, what would they be?
So Ava's dad, who he died before the start of the novel, but he was a storm witch, so he could control like water and storms and the ocean and stuff. And ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to have like water powers. Like I wanted to be a water bender and all of that. So I think that's what I would be. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. What would you have? What would yours be?
I think I would be a water witch. I was going to say a water witch. Something with water, just because I feel like I'm so distant from it in my real life. I'm not like a beachy person. I'm a nature person in like the way that I consume art, but I'm not so much like my daily life. So I would want something that is, because I'm really like a concrete person. I don't leave it.
I aspire to be a nature girly.
Yes, a nature girly. I wish I could be more of that.
And then they go outside and there's wind, and I'm like, no.
I feel like the wind is good for me. It's the sunlight. It's too bright for me, and it's humid. So I'm like, well, bye. You know?
I understand.
Yes, I guess we can like relate in that sad way. So, who is your favorite side character to write?
Side character. So I feel like out of the good characters, like not the villains, I really like Tristan. He's sort of a mutual friend of Ava and Kay that they grew up with. He's really nice, and I feel like he's just kind of like misunderstood. So his scenes were nice to write. And then for a villain, I like to write this character not because I like him, but because I love how much readers hate him. His name is Xenos. You will hate him. He's really fun to hate. I
do a lot when I was reading his stuff.
He's so fun to hate. That was great.
I fun hating him. I just hated him.
Like every scene that I wrote, I was like, they're gonna hate him.
That's how you know.
That was fun.
That's how you know you're doing a great job. Yes.
Yeah.
So last rapid fire question. We are both also K-pop fans, to the surprise of no one, specifically BTS fans or ARMY. So let's match Ava and Kay with a BTS bias or her favorite member, and a bias wrecker, which is a second favorite for each girly.
I love how we're just like bombarding chat with our own interests.
I don't care. This is your event, and you have chosen me as your conversation partner. This is the chaos that you asked for.
I appreciate it. So my bias is Yoongi, and I think Kay might also have him, even though they're like complete opposites. Like she's very like intense, like fire sign, and Yoongi's like more reserved, but I feel like they would kind of like complement each other in that way. But they're also like very determined and focused, so I think that would work. Her bias wrecker. Oh wow, am I just picking the same? No, this isn't the same as myself. This is not, I promise. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. So her bias wrecker would be Namjoon, and I always say like he's not mine because for me, I kind of get like, oh, he's like the best friend I grew up with. Like he's like my neighbor who lives over there, and I feel like Kay kind of needs that because that's what Tristan is to her. Like they just grew up really close friends because their parents worked together and stuff. So I feel like she needs kind of like a cool guy friend in her corner like that.
The cool guy.
Yeah. And then for Ava, I think Hobie might be her bias because he really like cares about people and tries to make them happy, and I feel like
he's optimistic.
Yeah. And Ava has a lot of that, like she has a lot of like innocent energy, even though like she has a lot of reasons to hate everyone, but she doesn't.
Cool.
she has like, she has a lot of like hope and like love in her heart, even though the world really tries to take that away from her.
Yeah.
So I think that would be her bias, and her bias wrecker might be Jin, who is now my bias wrecker. And I think they would just have a lot of fun together. I know I've switched.
Well,
but,
I'm excited because Jin is my bias. But
yes.
I'm weird because I don't have like one bias. I have two. I have JK and Jin. Though they're like, I'm double biased.
That's fine.
So that's nice. And Namjoon is my bias wrecker, as we all know. So those are my rapid fire questions, and now we're going to get into the audience questions. Yes. So the first one. So this one is for both of us.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite book out of the ones you've written? Also, sending lots of love. Thank you, Julie. We love you.
Thank you.
So, do you have a favorite book, like in your life? Like,
out of the ones I've written?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll do written and read. So, read, I feel like maybe one of the An Ember in the Ashes books. I'm not sure which one. I'm not sure which one in the series is my favorite. Okay. Not the first one. Probably the second or the third. And then written, my favorite that I've written is The Witch and the Vampire. And I've written like 20 manuscripts, so that's saying something. Ooh. Watch me say my next one is my favorite also. But anyway.
Yes. Yeah. So in terms of written, I would say my debut novel, just because it is my debut novel. It's BLAZEWRATH Games. It is highly inspired by the FIFA World Cup and dragons. And so in terms of read, Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson, which is a contemporary YA. It's super short. It's one of the first books I've ever been obsessed with. And I have yet to capture that talent of like succinctly explaining things and like transmitting emotion in such a blatant way, but in a short way. So really highly admire.
Yeah.
Yes. So next question is from Andrea. I feel like I know the answer to this already, LOL, but which would you rather be and or date? Witch or vampire?
I love how you specified and or date.
Yes.
Because I want to be a vampire, but I would rather date a witch. I don't want to have to worry about all that stuff.
Oh, interesting.
I don't want to worry about them, like, killing me. But, like, wait, no, now, oh, crap, what am I doing? No, I want to be Ava, because she's both. She's a witch and a vampire. I pick both. It's called The Witch and the Vampire. I can be both. Sorry for my non-answer.
That's an answer, though. That's just like on brand. You're doing a great job.
Yeah.
So next question is from our lovely host tonight. Do you have a favorite vampire in media / print?
This is a hard one.
I agree.
I really, wow. I mean, I love Vampire Diaries, but
yes, we have gathered as much
that.
Yes.
Honestly, I wouldn't date Damon long term, but I love how I keep specifying that. I wouldn't date him long term, but
you're like telling yourself that until you believe it. You're like, let's keep it up.
But I love his attitude. Like he's an asshole.
Yeah. He tells it like it is.
Those characters are fun to write, like characters who don't care.
And to watch, yeah.
To watch. Like, I don't want to be that character, but, like, they're interesting.
I mean, the sad thing is that I can be like that, but only when I'm really provoked. So, yeah, don't provoke a Capricorn, I guess. So, this question is from Katie. What were some of your inspirations when coming up with the world building specifically? Like, more so in terms of the magic system, for example, and, like, the actual location that it's set in?
Yeah, so I think it's hard because like I mentioned at the beginning of this stream, I took from a lot of my previous books, and I really just wanted something to feel like it was in a very like magical forest. I wanted a lot of color and life. I wanted it to kind of feel like there was a lot of art surrounding the characters. Like in the town, there's a lot of like tile and like stained glass and stuff like that, and so I took a lot of little things that I love like that. Like I just wanted this book to have so many things that I love in it, and then I just wanted the world to be really centralized. So I made the town really small, and then right next to it is where the forest comes in. Right. And I wanted the forest to feel kind of alive. And so I guess that was inspired by one of my books that I've written before, where there's like a magical forest and like a tree lady's villain person. So yeah, a lot of different inspirations, but mostly from stuff that I've either written before or just stuff that I really love or think is beautiful and wanted to write about. So yeah.
I think there's a nice contrast of beauty, but it's harsh at the same time. And I feel like retellings in general try to capture some element of that, but never do it in a way that feels like overall, like everything is encompassed, like in that sense. So reading this specific book made me feel like I was reading something beautiful, or entering a beautiful world that was extremely harsh and very dangerous.
Thank you.
So, like, I want to be in this, but I also want to get out of it, and I don't want to leave.
Thank you.
Very fairy tale-esque in that sense.
Thanks.
So for both of us, what is the hardest part of the writing process? I can go first because it's very quick. Drafting.
Ooh. Mine is editing.
Oh, really? We should change. You should draft my books and I'll revise yours.
Sounds great. But with drafting, the beginning is the easiest for me. And I know a lot of people struggle with that, but the ending is the hardest for me. It takes me so long to write the climax of a book.
Really?
Yeah.
But you did mention that you brainstormed and outlined a specific book. Do you do that for all of your books?
Yeah, I usually outline everything, but the ending, I don't know, it just gets overwhelming for me. Like, there's so many different things going on. I have to, like, write it in chunks.
So
like, I can write, like, 200 words, and then I need a nap. Like,
right.
But the beginning of the book, it just flows, like, so fast. Like, I'll write, like, 30,000 words and be like, yeah, well, that's great.
My issue mainly, I've noticed, is that sometimes I will have a twist or the ending in my head, and I don't know how the story starts. So it's the opposite for me.
I see, yeah.
Yes, this is from Andrea. Your cover is gorgeous, and I agree. How much input did you have as to what it would look like?
So I think I'll answer this question in general in terms of my books, because for this one, honestly, they gave it to me, and I was like, yeah, that's the
one.
Like, this one, I didn't really have to fix anything. Like, I was just, that's cool. But for my first book, I had like a couple of changes, just like small things, like the city the background of the city, I just wanted to make it look more like older instead of modern. And my team was really receptive to listening to that stuff. But also I just remembered with The Witch and the Vampire, my team originally asked me like, hey, what are some inspiration covers that you have? Like favorite covers of yours? And I picked stuff like Belladonna and
I love that.
Yeah, lots of stuff with like flowers and lots of pretty stuff. So yeah, then they just came up with this.
Yeah, I see a similarity in terms of the art style as well, not just the elements featured on the cover. So those are just striking in general, and I feel like they make readers stop in their tracks and be like, whoa, what is that?
Yeah,
that's the point of a cover. But yes. This question is from Michelle B. How did you limit yourself when defining your version of a vampire or a witch?
So I feel like I feel like allowing myself to have freedom with not writing it like how everyone else has. Like, for example, my vampires don't burn in the sun. And at first I was like, do I have to change that? Do I have to include something about the sun? And in an early draft, I had something that, I don't know. It was silly. It was just like, oh, it gives them a bad sunburn or something. But I was like, no, just take that out. It's pointless. So I think like
no one cares.
Yeah, no one cares. So I feel like instead of limiting myself, I feel like I had to allow myself to not be limited by the canon of vampires, because every vampire story is a little bit different. So I feel like that helped. And then with witches, I feel like I had to give myself permission to just lean into doing elemental powers. Like at first I was like, oh, this is too basic, like this is too simple, like fire witch. But then I was like, that's badass, she's a fire witch. Yeah. So exactly. I think instead of limiting myself, I had to give myself permission to not limit myself, if that's an answer.
That is an answer, and that's the only answer. So what is your favorite way that society has modernized a vampire?
Ooh.
They drive Audis. I'm kidding.
Smart questions. Oh.
Yes.
Smart questions. Modern society. I mean, I feel like there's so much potential with like contemporary novels or any novel that could take place in our world, if you could like combine vampires with technology, I feel like vampires would just be unstoppable if they really took advantage of that.
Yeah.
I mean, something you see in Twilight is that the vampires have so much time to dedicate to learning things that they can just like learn everything, and they can like get new identities in like 5 minutes and steal fast cars and stuff. So I think that's something cool that authors do. My world in my book is like an older time period. It's
no
like a couple centuries ago, so they don't really have much modernization. But yeah, you know, also my vampires are queer, and I feel like vampires are always like, you know, vampires are queer culture. So I mean, I think having the vampires being like openly queer is a way that I've modernized my book, even though, you know, it's set in the past.
And also, I feel like I would like to see the Instagram profile of any vampire living today, because that would be the most interesting Instagram ever.
Yes.
So if you were each to visit the world of one of each other's books, which would you pick to visit? I think I would definitely hang out with Ava just to give her moral support, because this is going to sound weird maybe, but when I was reading the book, my initial thought was, she reminds me of my students. I'm a college professor and I teach ESL, or English as a second language, and obviously Ava speaks English. But I felt like a lot of the times I just do better with people who have a very good heart, but they struggle with knowledge of some kind. Like they don't really have that belief that they can accomplish something. So I would just like to be there. I can't really fight anyone. I mean, I kickbox, but I can't really like defend her as well as she could probably defend herself. But I would be her moral support.
You know, I have a very similar answer for yours. I would just like to go help Sevim. I feel like she needs a lot of help.
She hates elves, you guys. Who hates elves?
In Last Sunrise and Eternity, like, she just needs somebody to be like, pat. Like,
it's like, it's there. Okay, honey.
So I like that we have a similar answer. We just want to help out these children. Like, they need help.
We're psychologists, basically. That's what we're doing here.
Yeah, and honestly, I think I would like to enter the trials in your book. Like,
oh my gosh, I wouldn't.
I like difficult things.
Yes, I see. I like them, but not when they're timed. It's like when someone
and like deadly.
I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I get stressed. So what was the strangest research fact that you found while researching vampires or witches? Like the strangest, most, what the heck is this?
So one of my friends who lives in Italy was telling me about vampires who live across the bridge from her.
Oh my God.
And like,
incredible.
We're not like super close friends, but so like I didn't really follow up too much with this, but
you would literally be my favorite friend. I would be in their DMs all the time.
Just talking about her morning walk at 6 a.m. and there's fog, and she was like, yeah, I don't go over to that part of the town because that's where the vampires live. I was just like,
I'm sorry, what now?
What?
Amazing. I love this.
So I guess that's like a fun, like, real life thing that I saw. I would also love to go to New Orleans. Like, I looked into like a lot of their vampire history, and they just I would love that. So that was fun to research. If you're looking for like any vampire or like supernatural stuff in the real world, like look at New Orleans history. So.
Yes, I feel like that's one of the scariest places I've ever read about or seen things about.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I would love to be there, but I'm also terrified.
Yeah.
So what is on your TBR right now? What are you currently reading or about to read?
I'm about to start reading The Sun and the Void by Gabriela Romero La Cruz.
I am so jealous.
Oh my gosh. So happy. The arc is so gorgeous.
God.
I'm really excited to start reading.
I believe it's coming out in this
July,
summer?
I think.
Yes, this summer.
Yeah. What about you?
The cover is beautiful. I think I'm currently reading. I'm actually about to start Thief, Liar, Lady by Destiny Soria. It's her first adult fantasy. Yes.
Oh, okay.
So it's coming out soon. I think it comes out in May. So Destiny usually writes young adult fantasy with a strong historical bent. So I'm really excited to finally dive into her adult debut.
Yeah, I've heard good things about her writing, for sure.
Oh my gosh, like literally reading her books makes me feel incompetent, which is the best kind of feeling when you admire someone. So,
yeah, for sure.
And what's next for both of you book-wise? Like, what's coming up for you?
Well, right now I'm just working on stuff that I'm drafting to try to submit to publishers to get another book deal. And so I'm working on a middle grade, which is like a portal fantasy. That's all I'm going to say, but it's really fun. And there's dragons, so I know Amparo would like it.
Ooh.
And then
yes, I would. That's
and then
my brand.
And I'm also writing a new adult. It's kind of like horror and horror, psychological.
That's also my brand.
Really fun. Yeah.
So I'm currently working on two things, but I say working on two things. I'm not actually working entirely on one of those things because that would be a graphic novel script. Ooh. And I essentially, as Francesca just said, I don't really have anything under contract right now in terms of new things, but I do have this, the script, and it's off to the illustrator because we're going to be working as a tag team, as I call them. But it's usually just a team of author/illustrator. Instead of the illustrator who writes their own script, I write the script and they illustrate. And I'm also working on a horror manuscript right now. I'm very slow going at it, and it's because the story is demanding a lot and I just don't want to live in that world for too long. So I'm going very slowly. But yeah, it's an adult horror that I really want to finish sometime this summer or fall. Yeah,
I want to read it.
Yay!
Yeah.
And I believe that is the audience questions. So if anyone... Yeah, I think the question... I was checking the box. I was like, did I read all of them? My Capricorn brain was like going.
I do have to say, all of your new upcoming work sounds so good and so scary.
Yay! That's all we ask for. That's all we want.
So last question is, where can everyone find you on social media?
Oh yes, answer that please, because I feel like you're consistently the same everywhere.
Yeah. Well, sorry, my brain is like, what do I do? So. Because where do I type this? So on Twitter, I'm just F Flores author, and then Instagram and TikTok, I'm Francesca Flores author.
Oh, okay. So I'm at Amparo_Ortiz on Twitter and Instagram, and on TikTok it's Amparo_Ortiz_author because someone else was Amparo_Ortiz first.
Rude.
And took my username.
How dare they?
A struggle.
Yes. Do you need us to beat them up?
No.
Okay.
Actually, I just found out today, such super random fact, quickly. The Voice in Chile, there's a contestant named Amparo Ortiz.
Oh,
like
you're
literally
famous.
Amparo Ortiz. And I'm like, I always knew I could sing. I knew it. I just didn't know I was a white, blonde Chilean woman, but that's the point.
The more you know.
Look at me. Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much, Francesca and Amparo. We really appreciate you both coming in to celebrate the release of The Witch and the Vampire. And if you have not already, please hit the call to action button down below to get a signed and personalized book plate with your copy. And then also, happy early book release to you, Amparo, for your book next week. We're excited for that one as well. And thank you, everyone, for coming out to hear the discussion about The Witch and the Vampire, and we really appreciate it. So
thank you
so much
everyone.
And congratulations, Francesca.
Thank you, and almost congratulations to you. I just hit my mic. Okay, bye.
That's normal.
Have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.